Alright, so now we're recording, so I can upload it to YouTube later as well. So, ¿quieres? Yeah, do you want the compass? It is being offered to you. Do you accept it? Because today we are talking about guiding the player. Because maps are hard, and players they have some difficulties sometimes, right? So have you ever like made a map and then you thought, hey, let's get some playtesting for this map, right? So you gave it to a player and you watched them play it. You watched it live, you watched them play your level, and then you notice it. They're doing it wrong. Oh no, they're doing my level wrong. Oh no. They're struggling. They're doing hypers when they should have been doing supers. They're jumping in the wrong directions. They're complaining about how they thought, oh, I thought I could go back. I thought there was a berry this way, but it's just the main way and it's locked me out. Oh, they're complaining all the time. It's rough. Watching your own map get playtest is a rough experience. So what often happens, which is a bit unfortunate, is that often this kind of thoughts appears, which is, wow, players aren't that smart, are they? But as alluring as that is, no. Listen, you gotta not be like that. Players, they do their own thing. They're trying to play your map. They're doing their best. They don't have the same perspective that you have. They didn't make the map. They weren't there when it was made. So they're gonna have to, find out their own way, which is very difficult. So before we start off, first a message from our sponsors, which says, please be gentle with players. Please don't be mean. They're doing their best. Please. So today we're gonna talk about how to be gentle and how to not be a jerk to your players by guiding them and making sure they don't get lost. So today we're gonna handle 2 topics. Also, wow, this is very delayed. I need to get a different program for this. So, going wrong places. We're gonna talk about players going the wrong way, players not knowing where to go, and we're gonna talk about players, there it is, doing the wrong things. Like as in actually doing the level wrong, not handling things correctly, not doing the gameplay ATM. So, first we are going to talk about the first one. Of course, hold player gentle like a hamburger. Of course, I would like to hold the player gentle like a hamburger. Then eat them? No, do not eat the player. That's wrong. So, first, I ask you a question. This here is a room. It's a room layout. It's a bit abstract, but here it is. And we enter from the left, right? Now, there's 2 exits. There's exit number A. It's in the roof. You go up and over. There's also the second exit. Exit number B. Now, I will tell you, one of these is optional. One of these holds a very room, and one of these holds the progress towards the rest of the level. Now, at this time, you can't really see which one it is. You have to guess, right? Is A the berry or is B the berry? I don't know. I don't know which is the berry. And this kind of happens sometimes in some maps where you're like, okay, which way is forward exactly? Do I go up? Do I go right? What do you want me to do? And unless there's like an actual sign there with a strawberry just has an up arrow, you might be a little bit confused. So, put the light beam on the one you want the player to go first, easy win. Yeah, but sometimes they do the other way around for dramatic purposes. So you can't really rely on the light beams. So instead, let's show what I'd say is an improved way to make that room. Ba-ba! Right here. Now, of course, we have the same arrows here, side A and side B. But now one of these feels distinctly more like secretive, right? One of these feels a bit more optional. And yeah, I don't think I have to tell you. It's option B. It's the small one. It feels a bit off the trodden path. It feels a bit nice. So It's done by making it be a bit off the ground, it's not as easily accessible anymore, and also just a bunch smaller. Will this be on the test? Yes, this will be on the test. Make sure you note down for later. So, this kind of, if we like abstract it a bit more, instead of just having an actual room as example, you have a fork. There's a fork in the road. You come up from the bottom, you go left or you go right, that's your choice. But, of course, you can make one side a bit shorter, and make it a bit smaller, which will help in determining, hey, which one is the secret one. Fork, that's a twalk? Yeah, it's a twalk. That's fair. So, with this twalk as well, it probably shouldn't be a twalk, but instead just a stick with a branch on the side. Because if the flow kind of shows, hey, you're supposed to be going up and the other branch is true like a side branch, that's when you can really see what the optional part is. So that part, like the straightening out of the twalk, how do you do that? So I have one example for you here. So let's say we have a layout like this. Kind of platforms, kind of ascending like that. And now, of course, you will see the flow is kind of going this way. Right? That's how progression works. So now if you add a roof to it with a secret entrance, kind of like this, like you can kind of see that the flow doesn't tell you, oh, you need to go into that ceiling there. That's obviously the way to go. This little bit, that really does feel like a side thing. Yeah, bury up. That's kind of what it says. So that's kind of the flow of when to do those, how to discern the main path from the small path. But a lot of people go a little bit too far with this. Because instead of having just there be a nice path you can discover, they're like, okay, we're gonna hide it. We're gonna hide these berries. So often because of that, you get examples like this. A layout kind of like this, right? I have made it a bit more blocky to prove the point, so you can actually look at the tiles. So if you were to think, hey, somewhere in here, there's a dash block, you can dash into that wall and reveal a hidden path. Where is it? Well, it could be here. Okay, it's got a little bit of a 2-tile gap. All right, but it could also be here, and also could be here. Could also be here, and it could even be here, because I've seen some people even put ones on the floor, which is not great. Because if you look at it like this, well, which one are you gonna get, huh? Which hole are you going to dash into? Well, you're going to have to dash into all of them to know for sure. Which means players are going to be bonking their head into random walls, trying to see where the secrets are at. Which is not great, it's not optimal. And another thing that I kind of wanted to note, I don't have enough time to actually make slides for that. Some people hide secret entrances in pits, where you have to go down for the secret entrance. But that's not great, because usually down means dying. It means means being dead in the death pit. So those secrets aren't great. Hiding a secret in a pit is a bit... it's not great. So, if you're not supposed to hide berries with 2-tile gaps with invisible walls and stuff like that, then how are you supposed to hide it? Well, as always, at this part of the Mapsterclass, we're gonna look at how Celeste did it. So, here's chapter 1, I hope you recognize it. So here there's 2 secrets, and of course, yeah, they're here in the corners. I'll just lean out of the way a little bit. You have the light beam indicating, hey, you can walk here, and on the right there's a bit more hidden one with an ice block with cracks in it, where you're like, I want to dash into that. So that's pretty wild. Another example from chapter 4 is this one. This is a bit more obscure. So here, if you look carefully, you can kind of see the top has this kind of structure, right? So you can see, yeah, it's there. That's where the secret is at. Because you can tell by the fact that the rocks are a bit. Let me just draw it on. Right here, you can see there's. I'm drawing on the wrong layer. Right here? Yeah, this part. This part has a little bit of ruffles in it. You can see the terrain is a bit done. Also, the background tiles don't actually cover that up. They kind of guide your eye towards it. So you're like, huh, what is there? So you can then look at it. I think a lot of people think secrets have to be genuine secrets that blend into the environment. Yeah, use contrasting environmental patterns. Yeah, Baphomet. Yeah, exactly. That's what a lot of people have been doing. And every time I see it, I call it out like, hey, listen, there's no hint here. There's no hint. There's no way of knowing. Please add a way to find out. Because otherwise people just have to guess, which is not great. So, one more example. Summit. This one is a bit of a rough one. Because summits, yeah, there's no... The clues are entirely environmental here. Like, the passageway itself is invisible. So, here it is... right there. So it kind of has the hint that it's like a complete side room with no real purpose, and there's a suspicious gap in there. So that kind of... it kind of like, yes, it is a invisible or like unnoticeable blend-in wall, but there's a lot of stuff next to it that kind of points at it. You're invited to walk in and bonk your head there. And of course, the last example. In this room, we have a... I always thought the vine looks like it pointing up. Hold on, vine pointing up? There is a vine there, which is quite nice. The vine says, and go up. There's a secret here. Of course, this is the last example. This room here. The secret here doesn't exist. If you thought that 2 tile gap right there was a secret, you are a fool and you have fell for everyone's tricks. This is the problem in the modded community. People keep doing this. People keep doing the 2 tile gaps and then people keep bonking into it. It is awful. Please don't put down please don't put down the gaps. This happens. You keep bonking your head on. You keep bonking your head. So avoid those 2 tile gaps, pretty please. Pretty please. The game uses repetition to guide the player. 2 block holes are an example because it uses them everywhere in the game. Yeah. Like, the blocks are very nice in Deco. And if it's I will use 3 block gaps. Alright. there should at least be some hints for where to look. Because you saw before, those gaps all had something that was pointing at it. The first example, the first level had crumbling stuff there, or cracks in the block so you could dash into it. The chapter 4 one had specific background tiles and an actual crack in the block as well. And the final Summit one had very environmental tells for, hey, there's a secret here. There's a secret gap here. So, to conclude this section, something is off. Something has to be off for a secret to occur. You can't just spot down a secret on the table. You actually have to make the player look for something because they notice something is off. So their curiosity is rewarded. If they think like, huh, is there something here? Something here? That's when they should be rewarded with a nice berry. And of course, always use a big hint. Always have at least one thing pointing at where the berry is at. Share an example of bad secret in Honley's server? That's fair. I might not tab out to it because I'm afraid of paint.net breaking, but there's plenty of bad examples of this and I'm pretty sure you already know them. Good players get berries and headpads? Exactly, that's the case. That's how it works. So, with that, we have talked about the secrets and we're going on to the main event, which is the gameplay. We're going to talk about how the gameplay works. So now, of course, there's no one right answer for, hey, how do you guide a player? Because, well, it depends on a lot of stuff. It depends on, of course, what difficulty you're mapping for, because if you're mapping for, like, beginner or intermediate or something like that, you should be a bit more conservative with how you make your gameplay. You shouldn't make it too difficult to read because, well, the inputs are still a challenge. The players are still trying to figure out how to do stuff, not necessarily what to do. And of course in later difficulties like Expert, I'm expecting things to be pretty unreadable because, well, that's the point of some of those maps there. To be a challenge to figure out what to do. Now, definitely a few maps that employ that. In fact, my map did so. And that also goes to style. if you're making a map where the goal is for it to be hard to figure out, well, there you go. Keep it that way. But if your goal of your map is to be a genuinely challenging map to input, if the platforming is the challenge, then you should probably try to make it a bit more readable and try to be gentle to the player, make sure they can figure it out. So, if we're going to talk about how to do that, we're going to talk about the small scale first. How to do each individual input first. Because each room is basically a bunch of actions in a row, you can see it that way. And we're going to talk about how do you make the player read one of those individual actions? How do you tell them, hey, you need to do a super here, or a wave dash, or whatever. So, for this, I have this term that I've been using. I don't know if other people use it, but I've been throwing the word around a lot. I call it when you have a vocabulary. You have all these tiny little bits, these words in a Celeste map that you can use, and the player will recognize them because they've seen it before. So it's like some stuff that says what to do, basically. It's a familiar situation, you see how it works, and then you can think, alright, I know what to do here. I know what to do here. It's like a setup, sort of. Hold on, I'll show you some examples. So, first we have something like this. This is always my classic example. So we have metal on the left, there's a small gap, and then there's a crumble platform. Now, every time I see this, my muscles ache to do a specific input. Try guessing in your head which one it is already. Because it is the wave dash. You jump, you do a wave dash on the crumble platform, and there it is. That's the setup. A lot of maps use this kind of stuff. Involuntary flex? Correct. Sometimes it's actually involuntary, and I do it even if it's not the correct strat. Because it's just so baked in. So it's like a hyper B-op setup to me? Close enough. I'm not an expert player. So, another situation. Papa. This one is a bit more of a high level one. So you have one of these blocks, and you have a refill right after it. So, I think a lot of players already recognize this. The Dream Hyper. Yeah, it's the Dream Hyper. You go there, you do the Dream Hyper. No trucks in class. There will be no trucks in class. Dreamer, for the love of God, don't hyper. Yeah, I don't approve of Dream Hypers, but at least they're very readable. At least you'll always know when you have to do one. So, these bits, these words in the vocabulary, it's a familiar situation. You've seen it before, and when you see it, you're like, ah, yes, I know what to do. They're readable, but they're kind of bad. Yeah, that's besides the point for now. The second part of these things is that they have to be unique. Because if a certain situation can mean multiple things, how are you going to know what to do? You won't. So let's look into another very common word thing in the community, being this setup. You have a good old platform and a green bubble that's sort of off to the side of it. So with this, the inputs, of course, is that you go to the side and you do the jump. There you go. And it's your super. So it's a super out of a booster. It's very nice, very cool. But technically, you can also do a hyper out of it. If you just hold down right. If you hold down right, you get a hyper out of it. So this alone, if you mix these up, is not a great indicator because, well, is it a super? Is it a hyper? No one knows for sure. So if you ever use a bubble on the ground for a hyper, that's throwing a lot of mist in the air. Like, hey, is the next one going to be a super or hyper? You don't know. So you need to make them distinct. So what most people do is they have the two versions. The one where you do it from the air and the one where you do it from the ground. So from the air, that means you have to do a wave dash because you can't do a super from that one. If it's from the ground, you do a super. So that way they're kind of distinct and unique and you can use them both. So that kind of says, hey, you need to make sure if you have a setup, it's a unique setup. It only points to one thing. Now, so these setups, how do you make them? How do you introduce new stuff? How do you make your own setups? Because, well, we don't just have an existing set of like setups and words. You can add new ones. If you make a new map with a new modded mechanic, you can add your own stuff. Or if you're using stuff that hasn't really been used often, you can make your own setups. The general way is just you either use one of those consistent setups, as I mentioned before, like the boosters or those other things. You use one of those, you just keep using it. Every single time you have to do the tech, there's a setup. You'll know what to do, you'll know how to do it. But the other way that I see a lot of people do is visual hints. When people, instead of having a gameplay setup, they use a visual hint, which gives them a bit more freedom. So these visual hints, they give you the more freedom to play around because, well, you're no longer locked to certain entities or spacings, but they're also less clear because, well, it's a visual thing. You're no longer like interacting with it, you're no longer being forced to do it. Alright, so I have some examples again. So, the ice wounds. Yeah, the ice wounds is an example. So let's say you want to show off a wall bounce. You want to show it off right here. This is the wall bounce territory. So you can do this where you just have a wall and you're like, alright, go ahead, wall bounce. But if you really want to indicate it, what you might want to do is instead shape it out a bit. So the part that you have to wall bounce on is actually sculpted out a bit, it stands out. And then next to that, even more, you can give it a little bit of a color. So the color stands out to the player. And color, the color is a big important part. I've seen a lot of players do that. I think Bissy in a map? I'm not sure if the map is released, I don't think so. Bissy did that a lot as well. And I thought, that's a good one, that's a good thing. So you can use different FG tiles to indicate where you want a wall bounce to happen, for example. Or any other tech, you can use it as a visual indicator. So, as a demonstration of why that's important, I want to show you a bit of an example. This one's from my own map, in Words. So here's a section that I messed up a bit with some visuals, so that like the edit that I made is not visible right now. So right now you have to do a wall bounce on that little bit of ground there. You'd have to do it right here. That's where the wall bounce is at. But the player doesn't see this. This is not what the player sees, actually. That bit of ground, it's a wall. That's fair enough. But this is not what the player sees. Because the player is playing a game. They're currently moving through the level. They're probably looking at Madeline. And now, I don't know what your brain is telling you, but your peripheral vision is awful. It is horrible. It's so bad. Like, you cannot look like 3 centimeters to your left. It doesn't work. All you will see is generalized shapes and colors, and your brain will kind of pretend it knows what's happening. So, if we unfocus this, if we blur this a bit to simulate not knowing what is going on, this will be the result. This is the same picture but blurred. And yeah, alright, we can make out some features. You can see, hey, we have a little refill at the top right, we have some big spinner groups there, and we have a nice little black thing there with a white border. Alright, that's pretty cool. You can see those, but the wall kind of blends in, right? Eye focused on the Madeline, correct. The eye is focused on the Madeline. Always behold the Madeline. So right now, the part where you wall bounce isn't jumping out at you. It's not very visible. So you'll probably see it very late, or not at all. So, this is what the level actually looks like. I used red grass to indicate some wall bounces sometimes. So right now, if we blur this one, here we go. Ah, there you go. It jumps out at you. It's very visible, even in the blurred vision. You can clearly see, yeah, there's a thing there. And if you use it consistently, that visual indicator will really jump out at people consistently. And people can figure out how to do that. Or yeah, other people also said a lot is to use ice walls. Ice walls also kind of work for that purpose, but they kind of suffer from the fact that they're kind of small, you know? They don't have that visual pop that using a different tile has. But of course you can just use them in conjunction, you can just use them both. Let me hold the wall, damn it. That too, you can also hold the wall with this. So, to recap this part, make sure your shapes are distinct and your colors are also distinct. If everything's distinct, it's readable, you can do it. So, with that, that's kind of how the small scale of tech works and motions. But what about the larger scale? What about the larger scale when you have a room which is just very confusing? So when you have a confusing section with lots of options, kind of like this, right? You have different blocks to interact with. Block A, B, C, D, all these different things to interact with. But you just don't know what order to interact with stuff in. Like, is this the path? Do you have to kind of go like this? Or is this the path? Like, it's hard to find out sometimes. And that's where players can often get a lot of confusion. So, how do you make sure it actually works out? How do you make sure people can read what you're doing? Well, the main way to do that is to limit people's options. Because if they can go to 4 different objects, that's 4 different paths they can do. But if they can only go to like 2 or 1, hey, there you go. That severely limits players' options and they will not have to struggle for that long to find stuff out. Those options can be limited in multiple ways, of course. You can have it be spacing-wise, where you just can't reach the other options because they're too far away. So you just, like, you can't interact with those things early because, well, you can't get there yet. It's not the time for that yet. Or, of course, the classic spiky death. Just put spikes on there. Put spikes in the way, make sure players can't go where they want to go. Kind of herd them in the right direction. Of course, you can take this too far and just put spikes everywhere. Please don't do that, but spikes are a very useful tool to making the player easier to manage and making the player actually do your room instead of not doing your room and failing. And of course, if you can use anything that you can find. If it makes sure the player only goes to one direction instead of the other one, there you go, it's fair use. Solution to everything, spikes. I do actually have an example of that, because I have this section of the map. I didn't have Aohorn open, it would take too long to open, so I just kind of took a screenshot of the middle of it. This is Inwards Chapter 1. There's these 2 zip movers on the sides. They move inwards. You kind of have to go between the 2 to go upwards and climb all the way up. But people always struggled with this room. They didn't know how to manage their stamina, they didn't know where to grab the refill or how. So what I did is I added these spikes over here. I added those spikes to kind of create these hard stop points where you have to jump to the other side. And because of that, the strat becomes clear. You jump across, jump across, jump across. There it is. And those spacings. Otherwise you wouldn't have those. And you would struggle a lot with climbing up. Like I saw people doing different strats where like wouldn't jump over one time and then they would jump the next, or do all these weird strats. They had too many options on how to beat this, so I limited it, and then wow, it turned from the hardest room in the map to pretty reasonable, not that hard. So limit those options, or at the very least make sure that the options that the player have very quickly go into a dead end. Where it's like, okay, it's obvious that where you're currently going, that's not going to get you to victory. So that you don't have the resources needed, or you're skipping some stuff that you need to do. Just anything that tells the player, hey, listen, this is not the way. This is not it. You're going the wrong way. Please go the other way. And with that, we come to our thrilling conclusion. We're going to recap what we've talked about today. So, conclusion of today. When you have secrets, Make the secret paths small, but not too small. Don't hide them behind those too tall gaps with no hints. Always make sure there's a hint. For gameplay, use familiar setups. Use the vocabulary to make the player do what they need to do. Don't just throw them into the water, throw them into the deep end. Give them a hint on what to do. And if you have a visual hint for what to do, make it distinct. Make sure it pops out, make sure it's unique, so that it really tells the player what to do in what situations. And for the visual parts, do remember the blurry vision, do remember the blur that you can put on stuff, because that really helps in seeing what is visible and what isn't. Some setups might not be that visible and fits in your peripheral vision, stuff like texture or stuff like that, or small color details. And for the larger stuff, for confusing sections, just limit the player's options if things are confusing. And that kind of sums up today's talk. And guide the player. I hope this answered some of your questions. Guiding the player's pretty pog.